everyone, it's Trena from John's Furniture Repair in the shop with a couple of giant gorgeous pieces that are pretty sad. So let me show you some details. All right, so we've got the little tall boy dresser slash desk. This is so cool. Pulls down to like a little working surface here, but it's pretty beat up. The finish is flaked off and there's a bunch of scratches and all that jazz. We've got a lot of missing veneer and big chunks out of the side of the cabinet here. Right there. And then the tops of some of the drawers have been dragging on the bottoms of the other drawers. So we've got some pretty good gouges there. And the finish is looking tired. So we're gonna need some complete refinish and some repairs and get this guy looking back to good. And that's the small one. Then we have this giant sideboard slash dresser. There used to be drawers in the center, but they're not here. And we'll just be doing a refinish. The top's got some pretty bad water stains and the finish is lifted here. So hopefully we can get all those out. A couple of pretty good cross grain scratches that we will try to take care of. And the main issue on this one is the hardware has broken out and chipped out the veneer on these slider doors. So these just slide to the side, and inside here would have been some pretty substantial drawers, very wide, but they are missing. So we'll figure out what we're gonna do in there, and then just a refinish on the legs down here, and cleaning up all the big nicks and dents from people kicking it and stuff over the years. And yeah, so I think we'll get started with this guy and get to work. Hopefully we can finish this before Christmas. We'll see if miracles happen. After growing up in my dad's restoration shop and learning everything he knows, I'm continuing on with the business in my own shop. And after 25 years, I can truly say I love this job and I just have to share it with you. Whether it's a priceless 300-year-old hand-carved piece of history or just an ordinary table or dresser, I pour my heart into each and every piece a customer brings me. I'm Trena, and this is John's Furniture Repair. Okay, so I've got a couple of veneer repairs on these pieces. So I'm going to start with this one on the top. I'm just going to straighten out my line here. And then just cut away to make a nice straight triangle repair. And because I didn't have any teak veneer, I just took a chunk off of some of my supply, and I'm going to use this lighter area here to splice in. So I'm going to have to keep the grain running this way though. So I'm going to trace that line. I'm going to get a little piece of tape and trace that line onto it and put it onto this area right here, because it's a nice clear grain. There's not a lot of this really black flecking that I have on my piece of veneer in this piece. So I'm not going to try to use any of that, just this really light part here. So I'm just going to stick the tape along the dresser. I'm going to use the straight edge of the dresser for the tape. Leave a little bit of an overhang there. If you have a thinner piece of veneer, you can just cut them at the same time as you're cutting your patch area. But this is a thicker piece. And I don't have a nice saw that cuts really thin veneers. So you have to have a pretty nicely tuned saw for that. So I'm just going to basically trace where that line goes, right there. And then I'm going to transfer it onto my piece. I'm going to go this way so I can go along the straight edge. As long as I don't get into any of that dark veneer. I'm going to leave it a little bit fat right there. So our line's going to be there. I'm going to cut it with, actually I think I'm going to cut it on the bandsaw first because it's pretty thick, and then we'll just fine tune it on the sander. All right, so I've got the legs stripped, sanded, and back on, so I can put this back on its feet when I need to. That's always a thing I like to do first. And I've got new gliders on. The old ones were metal and rusty and gross, so these will be nice. They're waterproof. They are bacterial resistant. They are definitely the way to go, in my opinion, until they make something better. This is what I'm going to be putting on all of my furniture, which you've probably seen before. I did find a big break. I was wondering why this piece was so beat up along here, and I have sanded and stripped it. And then when I turned it on the side, I found 2 giant breaks on both of these sides. So it must have been flexing down and then hitting the drawer and getting all smashed up. So I've got this glued up here, nice and strong again. So hopefully the drawer operation won't impede itself. So I've got this side sanded. I am steaming just because there's a lot of dents. The stuff is pretty beat up before sanding. So I just got one more side to do and a couple edges, and then onto the drawers and the little door. Okay, so we are on to the large piece. It's over 8 feet long, and it doesn't have any drawers, thankfully. Wait a second, just a second. I lied. There's so many drawers. I forget how this piece looks after it's been in the shop for so long. Never mind. They all look like they're in pretty good condition though, because they weren't outside of the cabinet as much as the other ones. Hopefully, that's my hope. The top is in pretty bad condition. It's got a big stain on the center there, and it looks like it ran down the side, so some water damage. Veneer issues, probably just a couple that I can see, but I'm gonna find more, I can tell you that much. And these sliders definitely have a couple of big chips out of one of them, and they're really running low in this groove. So I'm gonna check out to see if the hardware is needing adjustment or replacing. She has the large drawers that are in the center, and she said they look fine, so we don't need to deal with them at least, but we'll have to get it on its back, get the feet off, replace the gliders as well. So stay tuned for me flipping this on its back. It's huge. Okay, so I've got one of the sliding doors on the workbench here, and I'm gonna, of course, take this guy off, and this is the thing that keeps it in the channel. It's like a little spring, and it's only supposed to be connected to one side, but it's obviously not connected well, and it's been moving back and forth and ripping out veneer along this edge here. Unfortunately, this veneer is pretty thin for this channel, but we're gonna need to put it back. This is pretty much from this point to this point destroyed. And I'm thinking of putting in a whole piece just to give this whole edge some stability. So we've got our teak veneer here, and I'm just thinking of doing a section like that. And then this is the perfect width to go back in this to make this groove stable again. And it's so much better if I can do that than just piecing in little pieces here when this is all kind of broken and chipped in the first place. So I'm gonna need to make a pattern to where I'm gonna cut this off. If I wanna do just a small piece here, I think I'm gonna have to straight cut it off just because there's not really, I mean, it makes kind of no sense to make a giant triangle right here, even though that might look a little bit better. It is up top, so I'll be able to kind of shade it in, hopefully, and get it to hide a little bit better. The veneer is straight up to this point, so I'm hoping to kind of just use this much of it here, so I don't have to get into this crotch grain right here. So, first things first, I'm gonna cut a couple of straight cuts here and decide how deep I want to go and start chiseling this out. Okay, so I've been working on the interior drawers of this cabinet, or the ones on the sides anyways. I don't know if you call them interior drawers. So the first thing I do is take off this handle, like I showed you on the other ones. It's the similar. I noticed that all of the screws for the top screw here are loose. I think that there's not a lot of meat there to screw into, so they've all kind of been pretty loose and at a very weird angle. And this one doesn't even come out. So you can just pop that off. You can see right there, there's barely any meat. The hole is screwed a little bit too high, so I really have to angle it in there, and it doesn't tighten up a whole lot. So we do glue these in a little bit, so it's not a big deal, but getting the screws out is kind of annoying when it's at that angle inside a drawer. So just have to grab a punch and tap out that other screw that is stuck in there. You can see the angle of it sticking almost right into the side of the dresser. Okay, so those are a pain in the butt. So got those out, and then inside, like we had on the other ones, we've got this thin piece of teak veneer, and they're stapled in. So I'm just gonna take out these staples, and we're not gonna put these staples back in because we're gluing these. And underneath them, there's always a few remnants of critters, not sure what kind, and dust and finish and wood. I even found a whole bobby pin underneath one of them, so there's a gap there. All right, so I'm gonna take this over and strip it. Okay, everything's stripping fairly well. Just gotta keep the stripper wet on the surface so it keeps getting right to the raw wood. So a couple coats. And my stripper is really runny, and I get a million questions every video. What kind of stripper do you use? Wow, it works so quick. I use Swing Professional. What you can get as just a residential grade is circa 1850 in Canada. I do not know what to use in the United States because I haven't really shopped there or worked there before, so sorry if that is where you are. I can't recommend a stripper for you. But this one works great, and their circa 1850 works pretty much the same. It'll be a little thicker, and it'll take a little bit longer to do what this one's doing, but it'll get you there. So it doesn't take long, and we can scrape it right off. try to avoid getting it in the cavity of the drawer, so you're not cleaning that all up. And then I'm going to take my scraper on this edge, and these are veneered drawers, so there's a different wood on the inside of edge of these and on the inside. This is probably birch, so we'll just have to recolor those. Like that, and then we're going to do a whole second coat of stripper to get the last bit off with steel wool. And I use coarse number 1, or not, or number, I forget what number this is. Number 4? I thought it was number 1. Anyways, a coarse steel wool. Talking about steel wool, Bulldog Steel Wool Company, which is in Ontario, which is my favorite steel wool, and I've used it my whole life, and my dad's used it the whole time I've seen him using it. Anyways, I'm younger than he is, so maybe he was using something else before, but I don't think so, because they've been around for a long time. Unfortunately, they actually didn't make it through the pandemic, so they have closed their doors. And you might be like, well, whatever, it's just steel wool. A good steel wool really makes your job a lot easier, just like good sandpaper. So I'm pretty sad to see that they closed their doors. It's actually only a couple hours from where I am here, not even. And it's kind of cool seeing a company after using it all these years in Saskatchewan and moving out here, and it's just around the corner. But RIP Bulldog Steel Wool. So we've got that all stripped, and I've noticed there's a lot of dents, and because this is veneer, I don't want to sand that much. So I have been steaming every single drawer. So I just got my water sprayer here, doused down, and I've got my iron. I don't do any regular ironing, if you're asking. I just do ironing of the wood. I'm really bad at the other ironing. I can't get the sequence right for shirts and stuff. That's okay. I don't have anything that I need to iron that I own. And if it does need ironing, I just go with the wrinkly look, because that's cooler anyways. So this is all ironed now. So we've popped up some of those little dents and scratches. So I'm going to set this over on the sanding table, and then we're going to deal with the handle and that little piece of veneer. Okay, so we've got this little piece of veneer. It needs some support, so I've been using a large edge tape walnut veneer, and I just cut that to size. The iron's already hot and it's going, so and this makes it a little bit fatter, and I did do some tests to make sure that it wouldn't make the handle pop up higher on the drawer front. It actually needs to be thicker. There's a little gap under there which stuff was getting into, so it's actually better that this piece will be a little bit thicker and close that gap. So that is good. And we've got that piece glued on. It's nice and hot. While it's nice and hot, I'm going to take my punch, and I'm just going to punch through the holes where the handle is glued on. So we can screw it back on. Everything's falling off my table today. I'm not sure why. Maybe the world's tilted or something. Okay. So it's a little bit bigger than my piece, so I'm just going to trim it with my scissors that what lovely YouTuber sent me. He said I needed a good pair of scissors after watching me struggle with a sheet of paper weave. I believe that's when he sent it. Thank you so much. So that's the piece now. It's nice and firm, and it's not going to break. and it's a little bit thicker, which is good. So I am going to strip the surface because it does have some finish on it. So we'll just get that wet a couple times. And in the meantime, we've got the handle under stripper. And I just do half at one time because then it can hang on to it. It's a lot easier just to do that. It takes a wee bit time longer, but you don't get stripper all over your gloves and wreck your gloves and stuff, which is kind of half of the art of stripping furniture, is keeping yourself clean and the piece clean and getting the stuff off of there without getting it everywhere else. So I do one scrape and then I put it on a little bit longer, and I'll do a second coat on this while I'm waiting. And I just take a cloth to soak up the extra methyl hydrate, denatured alcohol, and I just clean up that one side. Then you just wipe it all down. If you don't wipe your denatured alcohol off very well, it will turn really white from the residue, so it's good to wipe it off. So that's half of it done. Looks like I missed a spot there. That's okay, we get to stay on this too. And we can just dunk the other half in and let it start doing its thing. And in the meantime, we'll strip this little piece of veneer that goes behind, and we'll just scrape this finish off. There's not a whole lot of finish on these, so that's good, but there is some. So I'll just do one scrape, put another layer on, and then give it a steel wool. And there it is. So I've just been sanding these right away with 180. So I'm just going to hang on to the end, sand it one way, and the other way, and then sand the edges. And then that piece is ready to go back in. So we'll put that aside. By this time, we can put another second coat of stripper on our handle here. And pretty much right away, scrape that off. It's not bubbling as much on the handles. They might have been recoated with something at some time. That happens a lot. And they are really dirty in there. You can kind of see a gray film. That's just oils from your hands. So it's nice to get these all cleaned up and scrubbed up. Let that soak a little bit longer before we rinse it off. And really wash that all down with that alcohol in there and get all those oils and stuff, which will also inhibit your finish from sticking. It's important you don't have that stuff left on there. So wipe that all off. And this stuff dries instantly, which means I can just sand it right away. So same thing, I'm just going to hang on to it and sand one side at a time. And you can note if there's anything you need to putty or repair when you're doing this. And then I just roll up my sandpaper, give this a little bit of a hit in here. Same on the other side. And that's ready. So now we can sand the door, or the drawer. So I'm going to use a 220 on the fest tool, and then I will hand sand with 180 after. And I know that's going backwards, but I don't want to get swirl marks in this thing because teak is pretty soft. Okay, so that is all sanded up. Now, at this point, there are a few little veneer chips, usually the corners, and all of the dents that we steamed came up nicely, so I don't have to worry about those. So I'll just put a little bit of putty in this one because it's too small for a veneer patch. And take a look around everything else, looks good. A little bit on this corner. Good. Very little putty, which is great. So now we take our little piece that we made a little sturdier, and we're going to put some glue in this recess. I should fill up my glue bottle soon. And we're going to note which way the holes go. They go this way. And I'm going to take a punch, or sorry, an awl. A very small awl. And I'm going to pop my awl through the piece, and I'm going to line it up with the hole in here so I know where we are. And I've got a second one, and I'll do the same thing too, so I know that this is positioned in the right way. And then what I'm going to do, because this screw really isn't doing anything, and even plugging it wouldn't do anything because there's just not a lot of meat here, I'm just going to glue this edge in there, because it's really the only thing I can do to attach that top area. And this wasn't every drawer like this. I'm going to put that top edge down first so the glue squishes down, not up. But there were a lot on these interior drawers on this one that were like that. So that's in there nicely now, all cleaned up. So turn around and put these screws back in. And I'm going to put the bottom ones in first because those are the ones that I lined up nicely, and it's going to hold that handle in for when I have to do the tough one, which is the top one at a weird angle. There. So that's basically how we are getting all these guys together. And I did this 6 times on this dresser and 3 times on the other one. Well, kind of 4 because the drop down had the same thing. But we're done this part now. I'm going to get on to getting those legs back on, which need a really good sand, and then we can clean up the face that it's, or the top of it, which is the face of it, which is up while it's on its back. All right, so obviously this track was very worn, and that keeps the doors doing their thing and keeps them from damaging the outside areas and the inside areas, and keeps them aligned with each other so they don't smack into each other. So basically I just lined up a straight edge cut with a utility knife, which is the best tool for this at this point, because I can't get a router in here and get this all cut, so I had to do it manually. And then cut some really thin strips of poplar, which is a semi-hardwood, here for the tracks to ride into, and then insert those one at a time because I can't glue them at the same time. It takes a little bit too many clamps. I mean, I do have more, but they're too big and I can't fit them in both sides. So, and then I have a little bit of extra because my strips weren't quite long enough, so I'm gonna run the tracks and do a piece on each side that's opposite, just so they slide along nicely. I'll show you what I mean. That might sound confusing. So I've got the first one in here glued up, and I also have the legs all sanded and back on with the gliders, and everything on the face of this piece stripped, sanded, and ready to go. So basically just the top and the sides still need attention on this piece, but we have to deal with this before we can get going with that. And this is gonna take longer than any of those things. This is a very annoying repair. So you can buy plastic tracks that things run into, but because these don't have it, I would have had to cut the doors down and then reinsert the hardware. So that's a lot of work too. So repairing this or doing a whole new system, you just gotta pick your poison on this one. So once this is dry, I'll do another strip and then do the last two pieces, and hopefully it works well. Okay, so I've got this channel all cleaned up and sanded smooth and all ready to go. So we did it out of poplar, which is a little bit harder than the pine that is underneath here. So hopefully that stays together a little better on the edge. We're gonna use as the last process, we're going to use the sliding compound, which you can use on wood against wood or metal on wood or whatever you need to slide. So it's just like a kind of like a cream. So I'm just going to try not to get it everywhere, but it does soak in. So I'm just going to get it all over this surface so that we don't have any friction. And this is where the little metal spring rides into. So I'll just get that all soaked, and then I think we are ready to turn this thing back on over. We've got the sides pretty much all prepped, a few putty spots, but it's looking pretty good. right, so we steamed the whole top, got a lot of dents up, and sanded it with 120. So the pores are open and ready to accept what we're gonna do next, and it's gonna be oxalic acid because this is a water stain, so I'm really hoping it comes up because it's pretty ugly. And it goes right along the back there. It looks like some kind of water ran down the back and then down the front here a little bit too. So we'll do the whole top, try not to get on the sides too much, and see if we can get this stain to go away. All right, so you can see all the oxalic acid has dried and crystallized on the surface here. It's the next day, but you can still see a bit of this stain here. So I'm gonna wash this off and see where we're at. I might have to try another thing or try to blend it in. Unfortunately, I did not get rid of all of it, and we'll see it more as we wash off this haze. Well, there it is. You can see it's still very much there. It did lighten up a very tiny bit, but nothing to an acceptable level, that's for sure. So I'm gonna try a little bit of just a small area with some bleach to see if I can lighten it up and get it to fade a little bit that way. Just wanna try a few more things before, because I really wanna keep this wood natural. I don't wanna do any stain work or anything. I want to keep everything nice and natural. So let's give that a whirl and see if it does anything at all. I've got one coat on all of these pieces, and I just want to show you the work we have to do before we keep going. So here's the stain. It's a lot lighter than it was before, but it's still not acceptable because it's right across that top. So when you can't remove a stain, you need to change the color of the entire piece to match the stain. So we're going to be darkening this piece to match more of the color tone of the drawers. And that top is lightened quite a bit with the oxalic acid, so that'll be okay. I like the color of the drawers. In fact, it's a little bit nicer, and the customer wanted a little bit darker of a tone anyways. So, other things we need to address. We've got our repair here, and we have to get that to match up with this grain here. Some of them do, I just have to fix that background color. And we do have our gliders back in here. And I did put shims underneath them so they don't drag along that bottom groove anymore, which was here. So we did a lot of work on that upper groove. Those spring stays had really wrecked everything. So we have all our new groove in there. And then other things, we did a lot of veneer repair on this piece. So we'll have to get that to match in. I do like how the grain runs through it though. Tried to match that up. So we just have to change the background color on these pieces. Same here. And those two down there. And this edge here needs color because it's different wood. Just some touch-ups everywhere. And I forgot there was a mirror frame for this, so I just quickly got that stripped, and we have a coat of lacquer on it too. So first things first, I'm gonna give everything a sand down with 320, and then I'll get a color going and do some touch-ups. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is actually put a glaze on this whole top. And that's just gonna allow me to really control the concentration of color where these stains are. I can really wipe away the stain here before I start any toning, which kind of tones everything darker. And I don't want these to be toned at the same time, but they're not tape oppable because they're so erratic. I can't really tape everything off. So I'm gonna start with a raw umber Mohawk stain, and I'm just gonna wipe it over the whole surface, and that's gonna darken things everywhere too, but then I can really wipe away anything that gets really dark here. And I'm gonna use a rag to apply it because I don't want it sinking in a whole lot. I really just want it on the surface. So I'm not gonna use a really wet rag, I'm just gonna be wiping it over the surface. Because it's a lot different if you use, if you're gonna use a stain, right away you're darkening the grain in a piece, and if none of the other pieces have a lot of color in the grain, then it's gonna look like a totally different look. Sometimes when you're matching colors, that's a big factor where you can't use stain. There's one that we're working on right now that is just a toned color. So the look of a color sitting on top of wood is different than like a penetrating stain that sits in the wood and in the grain and gives more color and hangs up more in the grain than just, something that's sprayed on top is a very kind of opaque, not opaque, but just the color doesn't have a lot of definition because it's just one tone instead of having the grain and the different parts of the wood show up because you're spraying over that whole surface. So matching colors from stores, this is very often a factor where you're trying to make something look like it does from the factory, but a lot of factories just use spray-on colors that are in like tinted lacquers and stuff like that. And so it's really hard if you're using a stain just from a store to get that look, because it's just, you know, a toner. It's not a color that you're putting on. All right, so we've got a little bit deeper of a color now on everything, and it's helping this to blend in a little bit more. But now I'm gonna take a bit of the rag and I'm gonna use a little bit of Varsol, and I'm just gonna swipe out color on these areas that are really a lot darker. Okay, so I've got that done. It's only making a slight difference, but that's good because we just make slight differences all the way to good. Now I'm gonna go over the whole thing again with a burnt umber. This color kind of, you know, burnt umber plus raw umber makes up this really orange tiki color. So again, I'm just gonna use a rag. And this is also a Mohawk glazing stain, not just a stain. So it's a little thicker, so it's going to be a little bit more opaque. And I'm doing this because my final color is going to be a toner, a raw umber toner. So that will bring it right back down to where it needs to be. So you see how that's nicely sitting on top of the surface there? That's gonna, you know, further eschew these situations going on over here. This is kind of empty, so it's hard to get some out. But I'll just keep working that across the top, and then again, we're just going to lighten up these areas a little wee bit. Alrighty, so this is definitely too orange, but that's exactly where I want it. If you look at these drawers that I'm matching everything to, they are a little darker and they have a little bit more yellow. So if you want to get to that zone, if you can see that on camera, you need to add raw umber because that's really going to kill that red. It's going to leave it a little bit orange, but it's going to get that nice yellow tone out of it. So that's perfect because my last color zone will bring this exactly into what this is. And it's really hard to teach color on the internet because the problem with doing color stuff is you have to kind of know where you're going and you have to know what something's going to do before you put it on the piece. So it can be really difficult to kind of explain why I'm using a color. And also color doesn't translate on the phone very well. So if I'm showing you something here, I'm seeing something different than what you guys are seeing. So it's more important that you know your color theory, which you can learn, so that you can shift colors the way you want them to be. And you need to know how to get things darker with the right colors and get them to the place where they need to be before you do your final coats. And you also need to know how things react under clear coats and with different sheens. So it's really a complex subject, and I'll try to go in depth with it in one video, but it'll be boring because only the people who want to know this will care. So I'm going to now hit this with a raw umber toner. So I'm going to get my mask on, get the booth running, and you can see how it will shift this color into the more yellow brown instead of the orange brown. Watch it. right, so I've got the doors in, and I haven't added a lot of color to them because horizontal wood can read a lot different. And when I'm looking at this right now, I like the way it looks. I'm not gonna add much of anything to these. When I stand back, everything looks cohesive. I do want a little bit of variation because I want these things to be a little bit more natural than not. Even though I did have to add some color to fade in the damage on the top. This is how it's looking right now. So once we get the clear coats on, everything will even out a little bit more. You can still see it, but it's much better. It doesn't stand out. So I think I'm ready for color, or I think I'm finished with color now and ready for clear coats. I always know if I need to do a little bit more after that. Obviously, we only have the back side of this piece done, the drop down for this piece here, and a little bit of color and work on that one, which is just the back panel. But I think we are almost there, and I did tint all of the tops of the drawers here, so those are done, and I do want to seal the interior of the drawers as well, so that still needs to be done. This is a big job. These cabinets are not a little bit of work, they're a lot. This is where that repair was on that door, so we do need to fade that in a little bit more, that piece of veneer we put in. So I am going to leave everything together to spray it, because I do want to see it shift with the color, but if I have to tint it, I'll take them out. And of course we do have this mirror frame as well, which probably needs a little bit of tint just to play with the rest of the family. So that's not a big deal. So this set has been taking me quite a while, and I just wanted to show you what I'm dealing with here. These little bumps on the surface, these are called fish eyes, and it's when the surface is contaminated with usually a silicone-based polish or oils of some sort. This whole set has had that, and this has taken me a lot longer than, you know, I needed to if the finish had just laid down. So what you have to do in this case is you do have additives that you can add to your lacquer, and I'll show you those. I use Lenmar pre-catalyzed lacquers, and I use a lacquer fisheye killer. It's an additive that adds actually silicone to your lacquer so that it will flow over those areas with contamination. So you're actually contaminating your lacquer so it kind of plays nice with the contaminated surface. Otherwise, the surface tension on these areas just isn't enough, and it pulls away and leaves a really bare spot. The other thing you have to obviously do is sand this down and go at it again. So I usually will take a, you can use a wet dry paper or just a regular paper. I'll take sandpaper and I'll use a lubricant because I really got to cut it down quick. And I will use a lacquer thinner, not a lacquer thinner, sorry, a Varsol, which is paint thinner. So I don't know where my bottle is here right now. But anyways, this is what I call Varsol here. And I've said it many times, but it's basically just a brand of paint thinner. And it's just used as a lubricant, and it actually degreases, if you can kind of see there, fast degreaser and spot cleaner. And like you do thin out oil-based finishes with it as well. So I'm just going to use it as, for one, a good cutting agent for my sandpaper, and two, to kind of get rid of the oils or contaminations, and then do some light coats of lacquer over top so it doesn't really have a chance to pull away. And then once that's sealing, get my heavier coats on after. All right, I've got the paint thinner on here. I'm just gonna sand it right down. You know, I think often on the internet, it looks like people don't have any issues ever with finishing and doing their projects. And I know it oftentimes it's just editing and people like to get things done quickly and skip bad parts, but honestly, after 25 years in this business, these things still happen. And like fish eyes are a pretty common issue in finishing with lacquer solvent-based finishes, even with other ones. They happen with shellac, and they can happen with oil-based finishes too sometimes. Like a spar varnish will separate from something. And I'm just gonna wipe away the slurry here and get some new stuff. But you can kind of see here in the light, it's cutting down that surface. I gotta get to the bottom of all these little fish eyes. So anyways, I try to, I'm gonna move up to 320 instead of 400. I try to keep my channel pretty real. I don't really hide when I have a mistake. I mean, I don't show you everything, it's time consuming, but I like to be real on this channel and to show you guys exactly what I do go through to get a certain result. And there's nothing wrong with having these issues in finishing. It does take a little bit of extra effort for sure, and that's annoying. And of course, it would be really nice if every time I went to go lacquer something, it was just put the lacquer on, give it a couple of little sands to get some dust nibs off, and it's all done. But those are the exception, I think. Usually there's a few things that you have to do. Definitely always touch-ups, toning, and you don't have to do these things. I mean, this is kind of necessary, but like all the details that I get into, sometimes, you know, those are things that I've chosen to take my projects to another level because those are my standards and my father's standards that I've adopted. And if you're doing something for yourself, you can do your standards for yourself. But all of the work I do in this shop is for a customer. I don't do any of my own pieces on this channel. So if it's not acceptable, it needs to be dealt with. I can't just let it go. So this whole entire piece has had issues like this. Not all sections of every piece, but there was some of this on every piece in areas. And just gotta go through and get the results that I'm looking for. And if it takes a little bit extra time, well, that's what it takes. So you can see we're getting down to the bottom of those fish eyes. And once I do get all the way to the bottom, I'll let this dry a little bit because the black paint thinner takes a little bit of time to haze up. Then I'll wipe this off with a clean cloth and put a little bit of extra fisheye drops into my lacquer, and we'll hit it again and see where we are. Usually a little bit of the fish eyes come through the second coat as well. So, and I'm expecting that. So there'll be thin coats. I won't have to sand this much. I should have done that in the first place just because this has been having lots of issues. But near the end of a project, you do kind of just want to get it over with too. So this is the last piece that I have to deal with. Everything else is together. So I'm just going to finish up this sanding, give it a few more coats, put it together, and it's off to the customer. So I'll show you when it's done. Okay, and there it is, all finished. Both pieces put back together and looking awesome. I wish I could keep this piece or pieces. Lots of beautiful teak grain coming out everywhere, and I love all the different tones and that wild veneer. It's a little lighter than when it was the original finish, so you can see a little bit more grain. So, remember this piece was pretty beat up inside here. So we've got that all looking good. We took the back panel off and refinished the inside there. Got that all put back together. We did take every single one of these handles off and repair the veneer underneath, reattach them, and they are all nice and sturdy and looking good. So this piece was the major amount of work that we had. If you remember, we had that channel that we had to completely re-groove. Working really nicely now. Smooth operation. And these doors were pretty good, except for that giant piece missing, and that's the repair right here. So you can notice a little bit when you're standing far away, you can't really notice it's there. So we had that big chunk that's right out right here. The sun's kind of shining, let me get an angle. So we just kind of carried the grain through it so it kind of fades away with the rest of the piece. And of course, we had that big giant stain on the top here, and you can still see it slightly, but it's nicely hidden in the color. We weren't able to get it all the way out, but it looks pretty good. Beautiful green. So yeah, thanks for joining me on this one, guys. It was a big one, and it was taking me forever with all of those issues. If you remember the fish eyes and stuff that we dealt with on this door too. So that kind of carried through the whole piece. So it took a lot longer than I wanted it to, but it's looking really good. A couple veneer repairs we had there. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to support this channel, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below this video. And once again, thank you everyone for joining me on this process, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Cheers.